voluntarily. They can leave the United States if they'd like to. So they basically are saying, hey, we showed up to this party on our own. We can leave this party if we want. And that's essentially what they start doing. By the end of Unit 8, we have 7 or 8 states that have seceded from the Union to form a new country, the CSA, the Confederate States of America. So you have 2 countries now going against each other. You have the CSA in the South, Confederate States of America, and then you have the United States of America, the Union, in the North. So with the secession of these southern states, the southern states start taking control of these federal forts. So to put it kind of in terms that maybe we would understand a little bit today, like in Missouri, we have a number of federal army bases or military posts like Fort Leonard Wood. If Missouri decided that they were going to secede from the United States and become their own country, the country of Missouri, technically that land that Fort Leonard Wood sits on is still controlled by the federal government, even though it's in Missouri. So if Missouri decides they're going to become their own place, their own country, they would have to then take that fort over to claim it as theirs and basically fight the federal government for control of that land. Now, the southern states have that same situation. There are a lot of United States forts within the southern states, within the now CSA, as they would call it, within those Confederate States of America. And the United States, the North, views those as still their property. The southern states say that they have now taken control of them. Over the course of a few months, most of these forts are now being controlled by the southern states. President Abraham Lincoln has to make a decision. Does he go in just kind of and say, okay, there's a few forts that we still control, especially along the coastline. So the United States owns or still controls some of those forts that they already had along the Atlantic Ocean. He could either give in and say, okay, the Confederate States of America win this, they can have those forts, or he can choose to send supplies to these forts, which would then start a fight, because the Confederate States of America, they are not going to allow the northern ships and the northern army and the northern soldiers to come into those forts to resupply them. So Lincoln knows that if he sends new supplies to these forts, there is going to be a fight breakout. And that is exactly what happens. This fighting at Fort Sumter is officially like the first battle, the first shots of the Civil War. So Lincoln does choose to go in and resupply these forts. The Confederates, so those are the southern states, they decide to attack the fort before the supply ships arrive. On April 12, 1861, the Confederates opened fire, bombarding Fort Sumter for 34 hours until they ultimately are able to get the people within Fort Sumter to surrender. During the fighting at Fort Sumter, no one was killed defending the fort or attacking the fort, but the attack on Fort Sumter does mark the beginning of the Civil War. It is actually like the first battles here that we see, or the first fighting, the first shots fired. Moving on to a few days after the fighting at Fort Sumter begins, Abraham Lincoln sees the need to kind of organize the United States Army. So he sends a request to the states that they provide 75,000 militiamen for 90 days. So that's just 3 months. That's all he is asking for. He is, in his words, putting down the rebellion in the South. Very much under the impression that this is going to be quick. This is going to be not very difficult to do. They're just going to organize the militia, organize the army, go down, stop the Southerners from seceding, and then bring everybody back together. And hopefully we can wrap this up in a few months. The northern states, the people in the northern states, the leadership of those states are not very enthusiastic about providing troops. They don't want to send people down to fight, and especially just the whole dynamic of fighting states that are already like within the country, but they're not really in the country anymore. So it's just kind of a very awkward situation. Border states to the Confederate States of America just flat out refuse to send troops. So a lot of northern states are like, we don't really want to do this. And some border states are just like, we're not going to do this. So going back to border states for a second, get here. Let's zoom in just a little bit. Okay, so if you look at this map, what you have is better depiction of what we see in terms of northern states, Union states. That North and Union are the same thing. United States, Union, North. Those are all the same thing. Those are going to be the blue and dark blue. And then you have the Confederate States, the CSA, or the South. Those are all things that we refer to as the things in the gray. So border states are going to be obviously these states along the border between the North and the South. Missouri, Kentucky, West Virginia, those are going to be states that allow slavery but decide to stay with the United States. And then Arkansas, Tennessee, Virginia, and North Carolina, these are all going to be states that decide to join the CSA after Abraham Lincoln starts asking for troops and after the fighting at Fort Sumter. So this is really the breakdown of the states in the North and the states in the South. And if you are ever wondering about, okay, we say border states all the time, we're like, what does that mean? It's really these states in between. So the request to send troops really puts these border states in a very difficult position, because if you are in Wisconsin or Minnesota or Maine, you don't really have to worry about the fighting coming to your doorstep. But if you're in Tennessee or Kentucky, that's really ground zero here for this fighting, and the people in those states know it. So they're very hesitant to send those troops, and they don't really think that they want to do that right away. So within 4 weeks, a lot of these border states decide to secede and join the CSA: Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas, like I just said. Virginia gave the South more hope for victory because Virginia has a very large population. They have a lot of resources, and a lot of the traditional kind of army generals stay with Virginia. Namely, the most important one is Robert E. Lee. He's going to be one of the most influential figures in the Civil War, a very kind of influential general, planner, and just battle planner. So if you remember all the way back to the Revolutionary War, Virginia was, again, still a very important thing. Like, if we don't get Virginia to go with the revolution, we're never going to win. The South sees this as the same thing. If we don't get Virginia to join in with us, we're going to have a hard time winning against the North. So after Virginia secedes, all eyes turn to those border states. States like Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri, like we just talked about. All of these were slave states that bordered the North, so they have a decision to make. They're either going to side with the South and secede and join the CSA, or they are going to join in the North. And again, those are these states that I was talking about right here: Missouri, Kentucky, Virginia, Delaware. So if you go back, all of these were important to both sides because of their location. Resources were key here. In 1861, the western counties of Virginia broke away from Virginia. They become a new state, West Virginia. That's where we get West Virginia today. And that's in 1863. So without this, John Denver wouldn't have anything to sing about, I guess. In the end, there were 24 northern states versus 11 states in the Confederacy. So that's what you're going to see here. This includes Oregon. This includes California, Kansas, which are all kind of newer territories. And then all of these down here are southern. So obviously, you know, the North has more states. And that's going to be something that is to their advantage. Planning. The Confederacy at first adopts a very defensive strategy. They believe that if they can hold their ground in the South, they would be able to kind of wear the northern states down and wear the people in the North down. And if the war went on for a long time, it would just kind of chip away at that support that the Northerners would give to those northern states. The CSA also believed that, just like in the American Revolution, the British and the French would also provide aid if they could prove that they were successful. So if you rewind all the way back to the Revolutionary War, the Americans thought, if we could just win one real battle, we'll get support from other countries. And that came in the form of the Battle at Saratoga. The Battle at Saratoga happens, and then the French decide, hey, we will give you public support and public aid. The Confederate States of America are kind of banking on that to happen as well, because they see the British and the French as huge trading partners, and they think, well, they will want to continue this trading relationship with us, so they will want to support us in this war. Many European, again, just like I said, they relied on the Southern cotton. The Union, on the other hand, adopted the plan of invading and conquering. This is going to become known as the Anaconda Plan. The Anaconda Plan has three parts: naval blockade to cut off trade with Europe, control the Mississippi, dividing the South into two parts, and then capture the capital of the Confederate States of America, which is Richmond, Virginia. If we go back to the map here, let me back out just a little bit. This is very much the Anaconda Plan in a nutshell here. So you have the naval blockade. A naval blockade, again, a blockade is just basically you're setting up your Navy ships to stop people from going in and out. And then you want to, they're going to then control the Ohio River as well as the Mississippi River, then cutting off these states in the western part of the Confederate States of America from the eastern part. And this is really their first idea to win the war, the Anaconda Plan. And then also they want to get into Richmond, Virginia, which is right here, and capture the capital of the CSA. Because again, the idea of capturing the capital of a country is very important. Kind of control the resources, control the government, and then you are off to a good start there. So on both sides, the North and the South, both of them have strengths and weaknesses when it comes to starting into this war. We're going to start with the North first, and then I'm going to show you a graphic about, I'm going to talk about North and the South, and I'm going to show you a graphic that kind of puts it into a little bit of an illustration here. So the strengths for the North, they have a much larger population. They have about 22 million compared to a much smaller population. They have, the South has 5.5 million. And of that 5.5 million in the South, 3.5 million were slaves. So what that shows you is just how small the population of people in the South was that were free people that were going to, fight to continue this way of slavery. Of the 5.5 million people in the South, 3.5 million of them were slaves, compared to, again, 22 million in the North. 85% of all U.S. factories and manufacturing were in the North. So when it comes to manufacturing guns, ammunition, uniforms, any rations of food, anything like that, all of that production power is all in the North. So that's obviously going to benefit the Northern Army. 70% of railroads were also in the North. So if you needed to get things from New York City to Kentucky, you could very quickly. If you needed to get things from Georgia to Virginia in the South, that's going to be really difficult because you don't have that rail transportation. Almost all naval vessels and shipyards were also in the North, so they have a much better setup in terms of being able to control the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean. Weaknesses of this, with those railroads, you do have long supply lines because most of the fighting is going to be towards the border and in the South. So you have to carry those supply lines all the way into those areas. The North has fewer good military leaders, and they are fighting an offensive war. Much like the British fighting an offensive war in the American Revolution, you have the Northern armies going in and fighting a war against the South and trying to take things away from them. The Southerners are protecting them, themselves, their homeland, all of those things. So if you look at the South, the strengths are just kind of reverses of the Northern. So the size of the Confederacy, just in terms of the landmass that they have to go with, the good generals that they have, they're fighting a defensive war, they're fighting for their homelands, much like the Patriots were fighting for their homelands in the American Revolution. Weaknesses, we already went over the small population, and you have fewer factories, fewer railroads, and little to no navy. So you have things in the favor of each group, but then you also have weaknesses as well. So if we look at this graphic, this is in your book as well. This kind of puts into perspective just the sharp differences in between. So population, you have the North and the South. Obviously, Northern has a lot more in 1860, which is the start of this. Total value of manufactured products in 1860. So that's kind of when you go and look at anything that you can make that is then usable in the war effort. So anything that you can produce to sell to make money or to actually use in fighting. The North obviously has a vast amount more of wealth and ability to produce those things. The South, if you just quickly look at this graph, you don't even notice that they even have anything. So the 50 U.S. cities with the largest population in 1860, the North has 38 of those cities. Border states make up for 5 of those, and the South only has 7. So you really understand here that majority of resources, manpower, and just manufacturing power resides in the North. Because if you don't have, you can have all the factories that you want, but if you don't have a lot of people to work in those factories, you're never going to be able to produce enough things. Union and Confederate resources in 1861. So you have railroads, farm acreage, manufacturing workers, and factories. You can just see that the northern side of this greatly outnumbers anything that the South has to offer here. So at this, the economic development of the North far exceeds the South, and it puts the South in a much more difficult position. But with all of that said, the South is not in a position where they are trying to invade. They are trying to protect what they see as their way of life and their homeland, which goes a long way in morale and effort. This leads us to the first major battle. Fort Sumter is the first battle, but this is the first battle of Bull Run, or the Battle of Manassas, which is what Southerners will call this, is the first major battle. Leaders in the North called for an immediate attack on the CSA capital of Richmond, Virginia. To do this, the CSA troops at Manassas had to be defeated. So basically, they have to go through Manassas and then go into Richmond. Hundreds of spectators from Washington, D.C. travel to Manassas and watch this battle, almost like it's a sporting event. They're expecting the North to win easily. They have this very, very much a idea that, hey, we're going to easily take this. It's going to be just a lot of fun to watch, you know, the explosions and the gunfighting and all this kind of stuff, and then we'll be done. And then the South will know, hey, we have your number. You just need to give up. At first, the CSA troops led by General Beauregard were forced to retreat, but CSA troops are then under the control of Thomas Stonewall Jackson. They stop the retreat. He gets that nickname Stonewall for kind of stopping the retreat and then advancing them forward. They force the Union troops to retreat along with the spectators. So imagine being at like, I don't know, a football game, and then all of a sudden you're in the stands and the offensive team just comes down the field and then starts going to the stands and pushing you out into the streets. That's kind of the situation that they're dealing with here. You're here thinking that you're going to see a very interesting battle or a spectacle here, and then you end up seeing a lot of bloodshed, death, and then you are even put in danger. So this is the first major battle. The Union has 2,700 casualties to the CSA 2,000 casualties. So we're already seeing a high number of deaths very early in the Civil War. This is going to be a continuing theme throughout all of the battles, all of the Civil War. Lessons that we get from Bull Run. The fighting in the Civil War is going to be deadly. It's going to be very bloody. The Civil War is not going to be quick. That idea that Abraham Lincoln requested 90 days of soldiers, that's just kind of a dream here. The CSA soldiers are going to fight fiercely. They're going to defend the Confederacy. They're going to defend their homeland. And that is something that is very evident in Bull Run. Lincoln realizes that the 90-day militia was no match for the CSA troops. You can't just say, hey, come for 3 months. We need you just for a little bit, against a group of troops that are just like, hey, we are in this until death. And that is what the CSA has. So Lincoln calls for 500,000 more troops to serve for 3 years. And George McClellan is named the commander of the Union Army. So these are some lessons that we get from Bull Run, and that's kind of the beginning part of this Civil War. So again, don't forget to write 2 or 3 sentences to summarize this Nearpod, or to summarize this lesson in Canvas. Since you were here, you do not have to